Very good evening and warm welcome to another week of Dan Really Likes Wine, and a week of huge excitement, partly because of just this evening's show, which is lining up very excitingly, but also some of the stuff we've got happening over the course of the next few weeks. So grab a pen if you use such things, or make a note on your iPhone 14 or whatever's closest to hand, scribble something on a passing child. This is what you have to look forward to. What we've got coming? Oh, the 15th of March. This is a big one. 15th of March, Dan Really Likes Wine will be coming to you live from Element House as I host the official launch of the Element, that marvelous red blend made by the even marvelouser, can you say that? You can here. Marvelous assist, perhaps, Erica Obermeyer, who's created something quite special for Element House. I'll be hosting that launch, but preceding it with a live show on the 15th, which I'm really looking forward to. Wave and Manny, the sommeliers, joining me there as well, and a small group of friends down in the Cape. And then a week later, the 22nd, I shall be out at Plaisir de Mal, as Michael Jordan, who just happens to be a director of Dan Really Likes Wine, will be officially taking over, together with his boss Rose, the property and adding it to their Bartney portfolio. It'll still retain its own identity, and I suspect the same wine, but we'll find out exactly what the plans are from Michael and his team with a very special live broadcast of Dan Really Likes Wine coming to you from the very heart of the new Jordan wine empire, being Plaisir de Mal. So there's a couple of things to look forward to. We'll also be having a bit of a Stellenbosch focus. It is 50 years of Stellenbosch winery. It's the actual date comes up in April, so that is an important one. And we're also drinking plenty of bubbles as we count down towards the official 50th anniversary of Cup Classique in South Africa. And to that end, we'll be having another of our many masterful producers on the show on Thursday, as Jeff Greer from Villera drops in for some bubbles, as well as one or two other specialties amongst our guests to come on Thursday. But that is all days and days away. Not days away, in fact, coming up tomorrow on the various platforms and on danreallylikeswine.com. Part 2 of our fabulous interview with the quite wonderful Michael Frijon, detailing a career in wine and what a career it has been. Hopefully you watched the first part. If you don't, grab it tonight, because it's a fascinating conversation. But part 2 includes Michael deciding which 3 people he would have for dinner and what wine they would share. And I think his selection might take you a little by surprise, but it is a splendid one and one you don't want to miss. So that's coming up tomorrow. But tonight we've got a couple of guys you have seen on the show before. In fact, one of them you've seen in the last month or so, because I was down at his estate tasting his Constantia Glen 2, culminating in the 2019, which is shudderingly good, and I suspect will sell out far too quickly. Do buy it, don't drink it yet, will be my plea on both counts. But we're not talking about Constantia Glen. Instead, Justin van Wyk, their winemaker, will be showing me his Van Wyk family wines range. It is a small and bespoke collection, and I think he has a great deal of fun with, judging by the wine I've tried so far. There's also a very personal touch, not just to the wine itself, but also the names, and we'll be running through those as well. But first up, it's the blonde bombshell who used to be at Eagle's Nest, with whom I've spent a fair bit of time over the last year or two chatting wine, both in person and online. And he's got an even broader smile than usual, because he has the single best wine in the history of the universe ever, or something to that effect, according to the press release. So let's find out exactly what the story is and why he is all smiles. Stuart Botha from Tokara, welcome back to Dan Really Likes Wine.
Thanks very much, Dan. It's an honor to be here. I wouldn't say the single best wine in the history of what the universe ever. Sounds like an excerpt from a book. But yeah, no, certainly very chuffed to have picked up this award recently. To be honest, I got a phone call from Carl, our GM, when I was driving back from the Elgin Vineyard to tell me, and I wasn't even aware that we'd entered the competition. So quite chuffed and pleasantly surprised.
Well, let's give people a little detail, because there will be some going, what on earth is Dan on about? What is Stuart talking about? Well, it is an award from one of the big wine competitions. It is the Concours Mondial, if I have got that right. It took place in Brussels. So just give us the annotated version first up, Stuart. What did you enter and what did you win?
All right, so we entered our Elgin Reserve Collection Sauvignon Blanc, which is a 100% Sauvignon Blanc from a specific site that we as Tokara purchased a number of years ago. And this particular competition, there were over 1,200 entries from across the globe. The heavy hitters were in there as well, from the Loire and from New Zealand. And we were lucky enough to come away with the trophy for the best Sauvignon Blanc on show overall. So, yeah, like I said, lucky, but happy that we have the recognition that the wine at least sits at the table with some of the best in the world. But like all competitions, I suppose it's the luck of the draw sometimes, but you have to put something really, really fantastic forward to get to the top table.
It is very rare that I would take issue with or directly disagree with a winemaker of your repute and renown, Stuart, but that's exactly what I'm going to do, because I'm going to throw luck out the window. Yes, you might need to get just on the right side of the palate of a judge or two in terms of narrowing down the last couple, but to be declared overall champion when there are 1,200 wines, that, no matter how polite and demure you are being, says very clearly to me that this is an absolutely world-class Sauvignon Blanc. There's no arguing against that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Look, it has to be said that this wine is made in the vineyard, really. I was out there again today. We're still, interestingly enough, picking Sauvignon Blanc at this late stage in the harvest, being a cooler harvest, but we're getting fantastic flavors out there again this year. But like I said, this particular wine is very, very site specific. It's very, very expressive of the place from where it comes. And I think a little bit of testament to foresight that was put in many, many years ago. I mean, I'm the lucky jockey that gets to ride the race pony over the finish line, but this was foresight from GT and Aiden all those many years back when they decided to actually go and buy a site away from the Stellenbosch property specifically for the production of Sauvignon Blanc. So I think kudos to them. And like I said, I'm just really, really happy to be a part of the team at the moment and happy to ride the horse over the finish line, I suppose.
All right, he's going to do his level best to deflect every bit of credit I throw at him. So I shall give up on that and change my tack of questioning and ask about the site that you've got. The decision to move it away was clearly based on the fact that, well, we want to make great Sauvignon Blanc. We don't feel that this is where we can get the very best of it. Is that a fair assessment of the thinking behind it? And if so, what was it about that Elgin site? What is it that makes it quite so magical?
Well, I think back when the decision was made, the world was waking up to cool climate Sauvignon Blanc, as they're referred to, and certainly on the southern facing slopes of Stellenbosch, you can produce some really opulent Sauvignon Blancs, and you'll see with us we do our Director's Reserve White, which is barrel fermented, and that suits, I think, the style and the profile of the wines that you get from this region. But there was a serious move towards the world looking for cool climate Sauvignon Blanc, and arguably the site that they eventually settled on in Elgin is, to my mind, seeing the fruit, looking at the neighbors, they're also pretty prestigious when it comes to Sauvignon Blanc. It is one of the best sites, I think, for producing the variety in the country. Combination of altitude, proximity to the ocean, soil type, and then we've gone about and being fairly fastidious about the clonal selections that we've made. So, like I said, it really was the coming together of some dedicated and smart people to put the vineyard together, but with a long-term vision. And I think here we are, sort of 13 years down the line, seeing the fruits of that decision, which is great. It's wonderful.
There we go. So I'm tasting them as much as I'm seeing them, as are you, as are a group of people in Belgium. And I want to talk a little bit more about the actual award and the competition in a moment. But let's run through the wine, because it's incredibly impressive according to judges from around the world. So it's got to be something special. If you will, introduce us to the wine, people who are watching us around the world, give them a sense of what this wine is and why you think it's really standing out.
So just to firstly approach it on the nose, I mean, I do a small percentage of the ferment in older 400-liter French oak. And what I was really trying to chase there, and what I'm looking for with that component, is a little bit more weight, a little bit more texture on the palate. And then I made a slightly different decision with the 2020 vintage, and that was to leave it on the lees somewhat longer than we've done in the past. Again, chasing that palate weight, that viscosity, trying to temper the acidity that often comes across in Sauvignon Blanc and brings its freshness. But truly, from the site, we're getting wonderful aromatic profiles of, you've got an underlying hint of pyrazine, that green freshness that often drives Sauvignon Blanc, but it's more towards the sugar snap pea profile. You're getting heap loads of gooseberry, Caped gooseberry coming through very strongly on the nose. I get underlying notes of passion fruit on the nose. Subtle guava, not very big, but the one thing that I think defines this wine and really, really makes it stand out for me personally is the hint of blackcurrant that comes across on the nose, or almost like a leafy blackcurrant character. I call it blackcurrant leaf. It truly comes across in the nose, and it makes it really, really exciting when you stick your nose in the glass. And it's, I think, the element that pushes it over the edge, pushes it into a different realm in terms of that full bouquet on the nose. And then, like I said, I work quite hard to couple that with a really drinkability in terms of the palate weight. And I'm quite chuffed with the way it turned out, I must say. Thinking back to 2020, when we were producing this wine, I was looking at the harvesting records. We finished picking on the 29th of March, 2020. And that was 3 days after the hard lockdown happened. And I can distinctly remember having a conversation about how and if we were going to be able to transport the grapes once they'd been in the cold store and once they'd been picked over the mountain to the winery in Stellenbosch at Tokara. It was a very, very strange time to be alive, and an even more strange time, I think, to be a winemaker in South Africa. I think at that point, we didn't even know if we could continue with the harvest. It was surreal, to say the least.
Yeah, you're almost in a space where you think this wine might not have happened if things had...
It very nearly didn't. It very nearly didn't. I mean, we needed, the big issue was really getting our transport of our teams out to the vineyard to pick the grapes. You can imagine, normally you put a whole bunch of people in the back of the truck. That was taboo, you weren't allowed to do that. So we had buckies with 2 and 3 people spaced out and multiple trips, and it was interesting, to say the least. Yeah.
Which I'm sure adds then to the sense of reward that now you've got this international platform saying, well, we've tried your wine, we love it, we think it's the best, and as they probably didn't when they were judging it, just what it got into actually getting this wine to exist, let alone taste so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I was pleasantly surprised, not to take away from the wine at all, but I mean, it's just the scale of the competition and the number of wines, and you look at arguably the wines that it went up against. To pip them at the post and to come out on top is, like I say, very flattering. Very flattering.
You do have to feel a little for New Zealand, because they used to have rugby. We took that away from them. They used to have Sauvignon, but we've taken that away from them as well. So I'm not sure. I know they've got an internet cafe now in Auckland, so I'm not sure if anyone's watching in New Zealand, but we're very sorry, and I'm sure you'll bounce back. I remember when I got, I think it was last week, I got the press release from Gudrun Clark and her team, and in with those tasting notes in particular, I saw that black currant leaf. I thought, this is just another daft example of somebody trying to be floral and poetic and make up things that can't possibly be there, because you cannot get blackcurrant in Sauvignon Blanc. It's not how it works. It does not taste like Ribena. And yet when I drink it, when I pick it up, and when you talk about it as leaf and that slightly muted, but still very much coming through, what causes that? What gives that to it? Because it's not overwhelming, but it's definitely there, and it's such an integral part of what you're drinking.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a signature that I've always noticed on the Sauvignon Blanc from Elgin, and it's become the cornerstone of the blend, because in Elgin we've got 20 hectares, or just under 20 hectares of Sauvignon Blanc planted. But that being said, not all of the the vineyards go into the making of this wine. We only produced about 35,000 bottles of this wine. But that is really call it the cornerstone characteristic that I look for when I'm going through the tanks and assembling the blend. I really, really look for that, because to me, it's always just been the wines that are more interesting. They stand out, or that blackcurrant leaf characteristic stands out, but then the wines beneath that and the depth of aromatics and flavors below that very prominent blackcurrant leaf when the wine's young become the sort of the flags. They raise a flag for me in terms of what I need to look at when putting the tanks together, because we do the blocks separately. We get quite geeky about it. Sauvignon Blanc is, I think half the reason for Sauvignon Blanc's popularity worldwide is that winemakers love it, because it's such a fun wine to make, and you can really drill down, and you can apply technology, and you can apply a bit of science, and all those years at university that you spent wondering why you're doing it, you can apply it to Sauvignon Blanc, and often you get a result.
I'm envisaging being stuck in a lift with you and Matthew Day from Klein Constantia, and the topic comes up. We'd be there for years. Yeah, well, we actually, I went and visited Matt with my cellar team at the end of last year as our sort of one of our outings that we do, just to give the guys a break and to show them something new and interesting. And obviously you would know that they've redone the cellar at Klein Constantia. And that VDC cellar is also particularly inspired. But yeah, we went out there, and Matt and I, we both make incredible Sauvignon Blancs, I could say. There you go. I'm not being shy anymore, but I think we make Sauvignon Blancs in a very, very polarized style. I mean, he shies away from reduction and sulfur dioxide, I understand, for a large part of his process. And we use inert presses and sulfur and quite early in the process. So it's two very different styles. But as you can see, the duplicity and the sort of depth of variety allows you to make great wines no matter really what you do, as long as you have a system that you work with in a style. Sauvignon Blanc gets a little bit of a bad rap from time to time for being a blast of green acid and pepper and not much more. I think if you fall into that category, grab yourself a bottle. It's only about 160 Rand retail, which for what's just been declared the world's best Sauvignon Blanc is practically giving it away. And it gets endorsements from some of our viewers as well. Keith Magoli, hi all, great wine this. A very simple assessment, but it says all that needs to be said there. And then Reginald Peckler from up at Cheetah Plains in the Sabi Sands. If passion were quantifiable, all you have to do, Stuart, just keep it in the blood. My friend Lorraine, she's mad about Sauvignon Blanc, surely needs to sample that and grant you 101% endorsement. Well done. That's a cellar you want to get into, Stuart. Reginald Cellar, Cheetah Plains in the Sabi Sands. I want to go back quickly before we bring in an old friend of yours to join us the second part of the show, and that's to talk about this particular award. It can be a little confusing for those of us who watch on from the outside and we see the stickers accumulate and the endorsements amount, and somebody's won a champion wine at the Malawian wine show and somebody else has won best Cabernet Sauvignon at Wine Expo Vietnam, and it can all get a little bit overwhelming. I know that this one is particularly special, but from a winemaker's perspective, from Tokara's perspective, you wouldn't have entered it if you didn't value it. So why does this one stand out? And then by extension, why does this award mean quite so much coming from who it does?
Well, like I made mention to earlier, the sheer number of Sauvignon Blancs and the spread from where they come from across the world really, I think, gives a lot of gravitas to this competition. It's the way I look at it, it's kind of like the World Cup for Sauvignon Blanc, to put it simply. And then you look at the number of wines that are tasted, the way they go about the tastings, it's all very, very done blind, strictly audited, and the caliber of the tasters that they make use of. That all culminates in something with a fair amount of gravitas, I'd say. For me, the more overwhelming thing would purely be just the thought processes that I've been going through are just the wines that we were up against, arguably, in this competition. And obviously, I can't name them all, but I mean, you can imagine the guys from the Loire that were entering, the guys from New Zealand. Those are two very different styles of wine, but beautiful wines. And there's only one trophy for the best Sauvignon Blanc, and we won it. Which, like I said, it was flattering, to say the least. It's a big competition. I know they were umming and ahhing about holding it, and due to COVID, and I think they delayed it and they moved it. It was supposed to take place in Portugal, give them a nice excuse to drink Sauvignon Blanc in a beautiful setting with a sunny outlook, but they ended up having it in Brussels, as I understand. But yeah, very, very chuffed to have taken the trophy. I wonder if they're going to send it our way.
You might need to head over and get it. I believe actually, who was I talking to? I was talking to the guys from Colmont the other day, and the Belgians, I think, are the world's second largest consumers of Cup Classique or champagne, and they drink a fair bit of wine as well. So it's not just drunk monks swigging beer. They've got a fair wine industry there as well. So a reasonable place to have the awards. I see Brian Kluver watching on there from just down the road from you. Cracking Estate and Wines, an undercover leader in the industry. Brian, of course, the most famous and influential Kluver in the South African wine industry by some distance. And also personal assistant to Rose Jordan. Looking forward to some exciting times with Bartony and with Plaisir de Mel. And then Grant Stalls, who leads into the last question I wanted to ask you. Tokara Director Reserve Red 2012 is still a favourite. Top class wines. What does it say about Tokara, about your vision for the estate? When you win this, most people celebrate Tokara for the sheer quality of your red wine, and you consistently make outstanding red wine, and you know that very well indeed. Is this just well, look, we can also make some pretty cool white wine, or is there a definite drive to try and even that up slightly and to put the white and the red at Tokara on even footing?
Well, if I look at it, if I can reference the Wine Mag sort of the winery of the year that we won at the end of 2020, 3 of the wines that were top in their class were white, and then I think two were reds in the top 10. I stand under correction, but I think that's the case. But look, we've tried to position ourselves, and we do position ourselves as a Bordeaux red and white producer. Cabernet Sauvignon takes the lead in terms of our red wines. You see that as the leading blend component in our Director's Reserve Red, which is obviously our flagship red. We have the Telos, which is a straight Cabernet Sauvignon. And then there are the whites, and the Director's Reserve White, I think, is a wine in South Africa that really speaks for itself. It's often sought out as a benchmark for that Bordeaux white style. I get a lot of requests here to do swaps because people want to taste it and have a look into it. And that's really Sauvignon Blanc on the Stellenbosch property. And like I said, you need to approach it differently. It's something that I firmly believe is well done in nice big 400-liter French oak barrels and with a dash of Semillon. But the Elgin Sauvignon Blanc, like I said, was a project with a vision. And you know, we've walked a long road with it. We bought that property specifically for the production of this wine. It wasn't also ran by any extent. It's been a long time coming. And if you look at the pedigree of the Elgin Sauvignon Blanc since inception, I think it's won the 10-year-old wine award, or it's been in the top seed for Sauvignon Blanc for the 10-year-old wine award a number of times, at least I think 3 or 4 or 5 maybe in its history. So the wonderful thing about this wine is, even though it's Sauvignon Blanc and everybody believes that Sauvignon Blanc doesn't necessarily age very well, I can certainly attest to the fact that this one is a really, really special one to put away in a cellar and actually watch the evolution of the wine over sort of 3, 5, even 10 years. It does certainly offer up more and more interest as the time passes.
Translation there, Stuart, quietly but firmly putting in my place and making it clear that red wine is not the dominant space. And that's it's more than fair enough, because I think the white has done exceptionally, and possibly slightly swayed, Stuart, by the ability of my wife to drink Tokara Director's Reserve Red on her own by the bottle in about 20 minutes. So that's the Nickel household consumption pattern swayed. But this wine in particular, adding on to a list of white accolades, and Tokara in a great space. They're making red, they're making white. Where is the rosé? Well, we'll have to get Stuart on that next time round. What I do want to do is welcome on our second guest, but before I bring him in, rather than me introduce him, Mr. Botha, he was your next door neighbour for no small period of time. Give us the behind-the-scenes introduction to Constantia Glen's Justin van Wyk, and a couple of pieces of information you really wouldn't want us to know.
Sure. You're putting me on the spot. Look, Justin and I go back quite a way. We've known each other since he started at Constantia Glen. I was still very green at Eagle's Nest when he started at Constantia Glen as the assistant winemaker. Ooh, and if I think about it, I was assistant winemaker at Constantia Glen for 1 year, and then I went to France, and I was offered the position at Eagle's Nest whilst in France, and Justin started in the role that I was in the year later. So we've run and walked a very long course together. I think Constantia Glen's a little bit bigger than Eagle's Nest. That might be an understatement. But yeah, we have a very, very long history of sharing and enjoying wines together, discussing vineyards, discussing how the harvest is looking. I mean, we were screening boards for one another, especially on the reds up in that part of the world. That's the sort of Constantia Neck area, for going on 10 years and 10 vintages. And yeah, I've got a tremendous amount of respect for him. I've got a tremendous amount of respect for the wines that he makes. And I think it's very, very exciting, his project that he's doing with the Van Wyk family wines. It allows him to broaden his horizon and I think play with new and interesting and different varieties, while still obviously keeping the focus at Constantia Glen on the main Cunane there, which would be their 5 and their 2 as the white.
I was hoping for kind of the best man speech at the wedding. Instead, I got the Diners Club Winemaker of the Year accolade. He's a good friend, Justin. He didn't drop you in it at all. Let's see if it's reciprocated, and welcome in our other guest, all the way from Constantia Glen. Justin, a very good evening. Welcome back to Dan Really Likes Wine.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, thanks for having me again. I think it's been like a month maybe, or less than a month, that we chatted about the Constantia Glen 2. So, and yeah, thanks Stuart for that fantastic introduction. I was sitting here nipping a little bit, but yeah.
Well, case that we discussed beforehand.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Justin, what can you tell us about Stuart Botha that we might not know? Just sort of lingerie models, jacuzzis, tequila, that sort of vibe.
No, Stuart's he's that sort of picture perfect and winemaking perfect guy. He's just salt of the earth guy, and fantastic beerman. Just a great guy to have next door. He used to pitch up at the cellar to either overprint labels or just come and hang out, and he'd always arrive with some baked goods or a nice cup of coffee. So yeah, just a great neighbor and a great guy. And I mean, he often helped us out. I mean, I remember one vintage where we literally couldn't fit all the Merlot into our cellar, and I called Stuart up, and it took like 30 seconds for him to make a decision. And he helped us out with the tank to ferment some Merlot. So yeah, just a great neighbor to have.
Dear, what a great friendship, great relationship, and it's one I see so often in our conversations in the winelands. I'm interested, just before we let Stuart go, to get from both of you. Stuart, for you, Justin the mate, you've made very clear the bromance is strong. What about Justin the winemaker? What makes him stand out? What's his signature for you as a winemaker?
Definitely his fastidiousness in the winery. If you walk into Constantia Glen Winery, you will realize very, very quickly that He runs a tight ship. You could eat off the floor on any given day of the year. And that for me is a sign, first and foremost, the very obvious sign of a fantastic winemaker. You follow that through to their barrel cellar and just looking at it and how neat everything is and how pristine it all looks. It speaks volume for that. Those are the sort of things that I look at. It's almost like looking up, the skirt of the winemaker. You look at their barrel cellar, you look at their fermentation hall, and you see quite a lot, and you can tell quite a lot about them. But then, his wines speak for themselves. That part of the world where he is I worked there for a number of years, and you've got beautiful west-facing slopes, lovely warm slopes for red varieties, and he's producing some really immaculate wines, and with depth and character that you wouldn't expect necessarily from border varieties in Constantia, but certainly he's nailed it. And I think every year that passes, I must say, the wines get better. So kudos. Second case.
Yeah, let me just give you a little bit of background to this. Stuart's desperately trying to get Justin to send him some of his wine, and Justin's been holding out. But I think he might have just persuaded you to send some there, Justin. What about Stuart, the winemaker? You've worked closely with him for a long time now. He's won this huge award. It probably didn't come as too much a surprise to you because you know his worth. What makes Stuart, the winemaker, stand out for you, Justin?
Yeah, well, firstly, I want to say, Stuart was very much downplaying that award in the first couple of minutes of your conversation, and Stu, getting the overall trophy like that, it's not luck, because there might be luck in that very initial tasting of getting the gold medal, perhaps. Call it when you're one of 1,200, but when you get to the next stages and there's a different panel tasting your wine to reaffirm the gold medal, then all the gold medals are tasted in order to decide the regional, the trophies for each individual country. Then there's another panel tasting to decide the overall trophy, from all the top performing wines from each country, and to take that tasting. It's blind, and it's not luck. Look, that's purely the wine. And I mean, obviously, with the Elgin Sauvignon Blanc, Tokara is working with a fantastic site, but all of those flavor profiles or characters that you talk about in the wine, especially the blackcurrant character, it is prevalent in Elgin Sauvignon Blanc fruit, but it's only prevalent as a precursor. So it's up to a good winemaker like Stuart, turning the precursors into final flavors in the wine, and flavors that are going to stay in the wine, for 5 to 10 years. As Stuart said, I think, cool climate Sauvignon Blancs age very well. And look, I think Stuart's proven even from his time at Eagle's Nest that winning awards is part of his game.
There is plenty of love in the air on Dan Really Likes Wine tonight, and it's fantastic to see. It extends internationally as well. Greg Sherwood on his 27th tasting of the day. Just finished a Zoom with Constantia Mafia Matt Day. Lekker to see Stuart doing so well in Stellenbosch. And if you're getting the thumbs up from Greg Sherwood, then you're clearly doing something right. Stuart, we'll let you head off. But before we do that, congratulations again. As Justin said, you did your best to sidestep every possible congratulation I could send your way. But as I saw when we did the launch down there last year with your wine, as we see now again with this Concours Mondial, you are an exceptionally gifted winemaker. I know you've got a wonderful team behind you, and I know they're a very big part of what you do, G&T and Carl and the rest of them. But you're at the headline of that. So well done again. Congratulations. And I'm going to be finishing off this Sauvignon Blanc with a great deal of joy.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Dan. And Justin, enjoy the rest. And thanks for those kind words, man. Let's get together over a glass of wine. Tell me what you really think.
Yeah. We can swap a case and then I'll let you know.
Okay.
There we go. Stuart Botha, formerly at Eagle's Nest and now out at Tokara, which brings us back to Constantia. Was it a tearful day, Justin, when Stuart came around, held your hand, and told you that he was leaving?
Yeah, I must say it really was, because he was our direct neighbor, and had a lot to do with Stuart, because there's hardly a fence between the properties. But but I mean, I think he was the, going to Tokara and taking over from Miles. Yeah, there were some serious shoes to fill. And I think Stuart's proven that he's got big feet and that he can fill those shoes. So I think, losing Stuart from Constantia was obviously a great loss for Constantia. But Tokara is one of those amazing, premier sort of Tokara Stellenbosch properties, and I think, it was a great choice, Stuart, for that farm.
Oh, it is a fabulous property. It makes some terrific wine. But then that's exactly what Constantia Glen did. And as over 20,000 of you saw watching the vertical tasting we filmed at Constantia Glen about a month or so back, there's certainly a lot of appreciation for what Matthew and his team does, for what the Constantia area does. But Justin, I don't want to talk about Constantia Glen today, as lovely as it is, your 2 and your 3 and your 5. Instead, I want to talk about a different project. It's one that is particularly personal, and it's one that speaks to the family. People will know Constantia Glen. They might not know Van Wyk family vineyards or family wines quite so well, because it is particularly small. Introduce us, if you will, to the project, how it came about, and why it's so important for you as a winemaker to have this extra outlet for your creative winemaking skills.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I mean, in 2016, the opportunity arose with the owner of Constantia Glen. We had numerous discussions, but the opportunity arose to develop a brand of my own in conjunction with my normal job at Constantia Glen. And I think, I mean, for those who've actually visited Constantia Glen tasting room, would have either at least seen the Van Wyk family wines or even possibly tasted the wine. So it's very much a sort of win-win relationship. So all the Van Wyk family wines are available at Constantia Glen's tasting room to taste and to purchase. And the reason it works is that Constantia Glen is a Bordeaux variety focused brand. And I think the one thing with Constantia Glen is that we never wanted to dilute the brand with other wine styles or other varieties. So Constantia Glen is focused on Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon and the 5 Bordeaux red varieties. So there was an opportunity to produce a variety of different styles, and obviously, so the initial sort of outset was to produce Chenin Blanc and a Syrah, purely because those are wines I enjoy drinking, and coupled with that, I thought we obviously need a white blend and a red blend, and for the white blend, it was going to be a Chenin Blanc based Mediterranean style white blend, and similarly with a red. Something using varieties such as Cinsault, Grenache, and Syrah, and create a lighter style of red wine, which I think is a style doing very well in South Africa right now. And so the idea was to produce 4 wines, and I think it coincided in 2016. I saw a blog post by Jaco Engelbrecht, Visual Viti, and Jaco just posted a thing and said, there's so many old vines which are being pulled out, and he basically just made a call to winemakers and said, come on, there must be winemakers who are willing to pay a premium to keep these old vines in the ground. And these old vines were particularly Chenin Blanc and Cinsault, which is what I was looking for. So that was my starting point. I contacted Jaco and I said, listen, I'm keen. I'm starting out, and I'm particularly interested in building a brand around old vines. So that was how I got introduced basically to farmers from all over the Western Cape. I source Chenin Blanc. So the first variety that I sort of buy in quite a lot of fruit is Chenin Blanc, and I source fruit from Darling, Wellington, Stellenbosch, being Polka Dry, and from Helderberg. So 4 different vineyards, and Cinsault also from Darling and Bredekloof. Yeah, just those 2, Darling and Bredekloof. But 2 vineyards in Darling and 1 in Bredekloof. So there's fantastic old vines out there, and I think it sort of it was an obvious opportunity to produce some wines from these grapes.
What about the opportunity to work with work with grapes that comes from such a different terroir? Set aside the fact that the grapes themselves are different, but just where they come from, the style that allows you to make, but also the challenge, the difference in the winemaking process to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis at Constantia Glen. How tough is that? But also, how exciting is that to, I suppose, push yourself a little more?
Yeah, it's an amazing challenge, and the one thing buying grapes from warmer regions, shall I say, compared to Constantia, is that you sort of have to start worrying about the acid levels in wines, picking earlier. In Constantia, we used to picking Sauvignon Blanc in March, similar to what Stuart said. So really long hang time. And I think one of the challenges is, when you're buying from the warmer areas, is to make sure you don't pick too late. Otherwise, if you lose the acidity and you don't have a good pH level, then you can produce a flabby wine. And I think that's where old vines, however, I think are a lot more forgiving. Old vines have got these very deep, tenacious roots. Particularly I've found over the years, and obviously it's been a learning curve, but the Chenin Blanc planted on granitic soil, I think, and particularly old vineyards, planted in the 60s and 70s, these vines, they've just got an amazing ability. I mean, I buy some Chenin Blanc from Wellington, it's hot. I mean, are you talking like 40, probably 50 degrees some days in summer? And these old vines, it's actually the Chenin Blanc with the highest acidity level or acid level in the cellar of all the Chenin. And it's a vineyard planted in the 60s, but on granite, pure granite soil, and it's just it's almost got this crystalline structure. And so I tend to use these sort of selected parcels of Chenin in a straight bottling of Chenin Blanc. So I produce a varietal Chenin, about 3,000 bottles thereof, and then also produce a white blend. So another variety that I thought could really bring acidity to a blend is Riesling. So I approached a farmer in the Helderberg a few years ago for Chenin, for some old vine Chenin, and he said he didn't have Chenin, but he actually had a little vineyard of Weiße Riesling. And I thought, well, this was 2016. It was one of the warmest vintages that we can remember. And, warm vintages means, acids dropped out quickly. So I said I'd gladly take the Weiße Riesling. And it was a fantastic little vineyard. It was one of the best wines in the cellar that year. And a fantastic blending component, which I suppose, brings us to the first wine that I wanted you to try, Dan, is the blend. It's a white blend of Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Riesling, and Viognier. So obviously, with the when one talks Mediterranean style white blend, Riesling is not normally in that in that sort of makeup. But Riesling became, in 2016, it was an important blending component to bring the freshness and the acidity to the blend. And subsequent to that, I've just really love how the Riesling contributes like a white blossom floral character to the wine, and it's now a permanent sort of staple part of the blend.
It's, as you say, it is unusual, and yet it comes together quite delightfully. You just get that tiny little hint of that whiff of petrol or turpentine that the Riesling waves a flag at, but mostly it's exactly that fruit and floral that you've just described. It's also, though, far more importantly than the makeup of it, it's got a really important name, Justin.
Yes, so the blends in my range are named after my two daughters. So the white blend that you're trying now, that's Olivia Grace. That's my younger daughter. She's only 6 years old. So, as you guys can tell,
drink too much
I'm
of
still
it
quite
yet.
a young guy. Pardon?
She doesn't drink too much of it yet.
No, but she does. She does have a lot more sips than her older sister, I should say. Yeah, no, she particularly enjoys a sip. Yeah, if we're having wine around the table. Yeah, so I mean, I think it was to create a brand. I suppose Van Wyk Family Wines was like an obvious choice, and there's a big merino ram depicted on the label. So as Dan alluded to earlier, I think he called me like looking like a lumberjack, but I suppose I do look a bit like a Karoo farmer. My family are sheep farmers in the Karoo, so that's the reason for the merino ram on the label. And I mean, I suppose I just thought, it's a nice way for me to pay, homage to my family and to my kids, to create a wine for them. I think, when you're making wines, especially in harvest time, only in harvest time, because we only really work in harvest time. But in harvest time, we spend a lot of time away from the kids and away from the family. So it's a nice way to sort of, I think, include them in the process. And I do include my kids as much as possible on weekends. They come and stomp some grapes. They're very good at cleaning the cellar, spraying the floors and so forth. So yeah, it's a nice sort of family affair. And it was, I had to call the blends some name, and something like Director's Reserve wasn't going to work for my brand.
I think it's such a nice way to celebrate your family, and particularly because it is a family operation in terms of this range. I think it's utterly delightful. Also, the fact that the numbers are so small. In fact, as I move on to the Riesling, it's just a Riesling. Justin doesn't have a daughter called Riesling. It is actually the name of the wine. We've got it here. What I do like to ask, you mentioned the ram on the front and the Karoo farming family. There are also some rather artistically done pink flowers at the front. Do those also speak to something of the family heritage?
Yes. So the three little flowers in the front are those sort of pay homage to my wife's side of the family, our Welsh side of the family. So and the three flowers basically depict the three ladies in my life. And I suppose it's a nice, there's three flowers there, so it's another excuse to say that the family is complete. I don't think we need a fourth flower on the label. But yeah, it's definitely been spoken of, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah, so the daffodils, the three flowers are daffodils, which is the national Welsh flower, so I was told. So, and it's interesting, daffodils was also, I remember it clearly from my childhood. We've got this, I'm sure you've driven past it many times, Dan, but in the Great Karoo, about 70 kilometers from Beaufort West and about 100 kilometers from Oudtshoorn, there's a stretch of road. It's dead straight. I don't think there's a turn in the road for about 25 kilometers. It's dead straight and it's flat. And yeah, they're in the middle of this dry, arid part of the world. There's this little oasis. And I always remember very clearly that my gran used to have daffodils all over the garden. So it's just one of those memories, I suppose, from childhood.
And I love the fact that they translate into what's a really simply done but very meaningful label. I also love the fact it's something we have in common, the way you're talking about maybe the family is complete, etc., as though it's actually your call. We're both married to lawyers. We both know we don't make these decisions at all. We do as we are told and hope to get our pocket at the end of the month. That is how this world works. We do distract ourselves with wine now. Let's have a quick look at that second wine, because we're almost up in an hour. We're having so much fun on the show. Let's have a quick taste of the Riesling. Not a wine we get a huge amount of in South Africa, but that which we do, I generally enjoy. I find it is something different, and I always like a little diversion from what I'm normally drinking. You obviously saw something in that parcel in the Helderberg when it was offered to you, and it's translated into a wine that you've now got on the market. What makes this Riesling special for you?
Yeah, exactly. So there was never an intention to produce a Riesling. But yeah, it's an old vineyard planted in 1982, and which is before I was born. And it's on sand and granite, basically, in the lower Helderberg. And it's just, quite a gnarly vineyard. But so it produces an amazing small little bunches of Riesling with heaps of flavor and fantastic acidity. But it doesn't have that acidity of a German Riesling, and doesn't have that style of a German Riesling. So it's very much, a South African expression, I suppose, of Riesling. And I think really what I've tried to create there is it's just a Riesling that can represent that particular site. I particularly enjoy the wine, and hence decided to produce a bottling that showcases that site. So it's not a vintage bottling. So I don't know if we've got time to explain, but basically it's non-vintage. And the reason for that is I basically keep 1 barrel of the Riesling. I keep it back every year and keep it in a barrel on the lees for a full 18 months. And then I blend that barrel with a fresh vintage. By blending that, I just feel that the barrel portion adds fantastic sort of creaminess and complexity to the wine, and almost turns it from a sort of racy Riesling to something that's a lot more complete. And I think it is, in my mind, a better expression of the site where the grapes come from.
All right, yeah, lovely to try this alongside, say, a nice dry Dr. Lawson or something out of the German Riesling territory, because I think you'll see the similarities, but there is a lovely contrast as well. And you got this just right. It's a lovely wine to drink, and I'd talk about it more, but I can't, because we've only got about 4 minutes left because of the Dan Nicol Show Instagram Live. Stanton Fredericks is waiting for me at 6 o'clock to try and explain how on earth Bafana lost to Sudan. Far easier to understand is just why this particular wine is great. It's very much a lighter style red, as you can see just from the color, headlined by a nice healthy splash of Cinsault. Is this the kind of red wine that really puts a smile on Justin's face?
Yes, absolutely. So this is my older daughter, Rebecca May. So I only have 2 daughters, and Rebecca May purely got the opportunity to choose the color of her wine because she happened to be she was able to talk when I started producing the wines in 2016, and she said her wine needs to be red. But this is basically, it's just juicy. It's 60% Cinsault, 20% Grenache, and 20% Syrah. And it's everything that that Cinsault and Grenache and Cinsault and Grenache being from Darling, just got all that perfume, fantastic freshness, a lot of the freshness coming from whole bunch fermentation, and I think in the range it's probably the best seller, because I always describe this as a better option than rosé in summer.
And I think it's interesting competition between rosé and the lighter reds, with another summer on the horizon. But that is a conversation for another time. Justin, thank you. And I must say a particular thank you, because you sent me up the whole range. We haven't been able to talk about all of them in detail, but you sent me up your white blend. You only make about 400 bottles of it. So to part with one of them for me is enormously generous, and thank you for it. Thank you, too, for the time and for your half of the bromantic explosion of but good luck getting your harvest translated into another fabulous vintage, and I suspect it won't be too much longer before I'm back down annoying you at Constantia Glen once more.
Fantastic. It would be good to see you. Thank you.
There we go. Justin van Wyk, really is an absolute delight to hang out with, as is Stuart Botha from Tokara, my 2 guests today. Good friends, great winemakers, and 2 guys with lots to celebrate. In this case tonight, Justin and his family range, and a terrific range it is. And in the case of Stuart, amongst those fabulous wines, red and white, that Concours Mondial award for the world's best Sauvignon Blanc. And well done to the entire Tokara team on a terrific accolade. All right, just before we wrap up, a reminder, 15th, I'll be at Element House, 15th of April, as we go live with the launch of the Element, and then the 22nd out of Plaisir de Merle as the Odan family take over an iconic South African property and will take a great estate to even greater heights, I have no doubt. If you're not part of the Pick and Pay Wine Club, you should be. You'll find plenty of Tokara and plenty of Constantia Glen on the shelves of Pick and Pay. It's very simple. SMS your smart shopper number. That's a text if you're new school, 36775. It gets you 3 times the smart shopper points on all wine, 20% off 10 wines every month. There's a special deal on a Magnum and on a case, and you get invitations to some very cool events as well. So no reason not to be part of it. Don't forget to join us on Thursday when Jeff Greer from Villera headlines our guest list. Also tomorrow, part 2 of that fabulous interview with Michael Fridge on A Life in Wine. And that comes out tomorrow. Watch the first one if you haven't already. It really is worth it. He's a wonderful man with a great sense of humor and just a natural raconteur in the wine space. That does it for tonight. Big thank you to Justin and to Stuart. Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. Back live again Thursday. We'll see you then. Goodbye.